This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for The Rant with Barbara Rose Brooker. And today, we're not going to really be talking about ageism like we do a lot of the time. We're going to talk about something that is, I think, a real necessary conversation because we're all the same, and we need to admit that. So, Barbara, tell me a little bit about your guests because you and I, as different as we are, we're the same. And you have two wonderful guests as well.
Oh my God, I'm so lucky, listeners. Now, first of all, to my guests and my listeners, you know I tend to rant a little bit. Like I said earlier, I'm not Christiana Anapur. I just kind of go with it. And these guests are so wonderful today. They're going to be doing most of the talking. But I have a main question that I'm interested in personally is there systemic homophobia in our current anti-gay, racist, anti-age, anti-everything culture? And is the media promoting shows and stories about and from people of different sexual orientations, from the LGBTQ communities? Because that to me is very important. This is how we're all learning and watching and internalizing through the media. So listeners, both my guests are experienced with the media. Barry Miller, who has been on before, certainly has been the most fabulous, important PR person in New York. I mean, Barry's represented famous authors, from Victoria's Secret to authors to all kinds of models to everything. And Barry and David have been together, I was just telling Matt, 35 years, or is it 30?
30.
30 years, okay.
Let's be clear. Like 35.
Yeah. Like I said to Matt, I can't even last a weekend, as you know, Barry. So I'm always so impressed by that kind of connection. Matt Jackson, oh my God, what a treat. And also an honor to have you on today. And Matt has been in the industry for 20 years. And you know, so I don't flub up and stumble. I am going to just read the opening paragraph, listeners, so you can hear what Matt does. All Roads Lead Productions, I love that title. All Roads Lead Productions is a production company started up by Dava Savell and Matt Jackson, our guest, focusing on developing original content by talented, young, diverse writers. These writers are LGBTQ community, and they're every race, every gender. And he says that he is currently developing many projects. And so I'm just going to start there, because to me, to get the stories out, the voices out, other voices of all people, is how maybe we'll promote generations to come where we're not defined and segregated by who we are. So I'm going to I'll let you start, Matt.
Sure. Yes, All Roads Lead Productions was started in October of 2019. Our goal was, if we're going to be a production company, we can't be like every other production company. There are hundreds in Los Angeles. What is the kind of production company we want to be? And so we thought that it was really important to celebrate the young voices of people who are different and feel different and are from different subcultures, but are also incredibly talented. And maybe they are young but don't have a WGA credit, which means that they don't get put into the big agencies, which means they don't get put into the system to get jobs. So our idea was what we did was we read 700 submissions, from different writers. And so these stories were hilarious, by the way, guys. Like these stories were, I mean, I can just give you one example that came in.
Please.
We met with a girl flew from New York to LA to meet with us. She was 23. She's Asian. Her parents wanted her to be a professor or a pianist or a doctor. You can only imagine, right? And she went a different path, and she started studying the female body. She was taking extra classes, and she's ended up taking a class on female orgasms. and she got really into it, and she realized that she's not this straight-laced Asian girl, but rather that she is more curious and more aware. And she ended up meeting her partner, a man who identifies as queer, and they are now married. And I asked, is your relationship open? Is it closed? How does this work? And she's like, we're both just queer, and it just is.
I love that line.
Interesting.
We're both just queer, and it just is.
It just means like we do what we do, and we got married. They walked down the aisle, but as a gay man who came out, living in Minnesota on a farm, this was the craziest thing that I had ever heard. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying this story's crazy, but I am saying that one thing that perhaps we're not aware of in the media and in storytelling is that somebody might be Black and gay. But there's a plus factor. There's a plus, there's so many factors. And what makes me frustrated sometimes is that the media decides to tell stories that feel like, yes, it's time, but is it just a moment in time? Is it a trend? Is it something that we really can get behind? And to your point, Barbara, what you're saying is there systematic problems within the system to get the stories told? And I can tell you right now that some of the people that I'm pitching my projects to, and not in a negative way, I'm not trying to be negative, but in a realistic way, some of the people that I'm pitching to are in such high-powered positions with white privilege.
Exactly.
I hear on the phone call their note and their idea and the way they see the show. And then I have to go, rewind. You guys didn't walk in Black shoes, gay shoes, or in Harlem shoes. So this story is actually authentic and true. And so that is what I'm dealing with, is trying to keep the stories authentic and true and still be put on television. And it's not an easy task.
No, it isn't. And particularly with don't get me started on the media, because I know how they are with age, so I can imagine. So how do you, how do you actually get them on the network?
So what we're doing right now is we're still in our, development takes a long time.
Yeah.
So we've been around for about a year. We're still in our second year we're just starting our second year of development.
You won an Emmy.
Well, my partner Dava won an Emmy she was the showrunner and writer of the Ellen DeGeneres sitcom. And so she wrote the coming out episode.
She did.
Yeah. And Dava is a great showrunner, creator, writer. She's funny. We have a really good time together. So what we do is we know that all of the celebrities out there, Black, white, or other, care about diversity. They really are jumping in, and they all know that it's time to tell these stories.
So it's getting better.
Yeah, I was saying, like, we opened our company October 2019. That's a very important thing because Black Lives Matter had not happened yet.
That's right.
And quarantine had not happened, and all this stuff had not happened. So we are now setting up meetings with John Legend and Tracy Ellis Ross.
Fabulous.
Reese Witherspoon, and everybody wants to hear what we're doing And our goal is to really celebrate diversity on television in a way that feels like, oh, we don't just have to cast a Black guy in this episode, but like tell the real story.
The real stories and
Yeah.
the real people.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And I want to see more and more and more of it.
Yeah.
I think what you're doing is incredibly important, and important for a new generation, to promote a new generation without that segregation. I'm so tired of watching some of these shows. They're all the same. They're all the white privilege shows. Because people one way, that's the trouble. They're showing one way and we're so many ways. Barry, what do you think about this?
I think it's extraordinary, and it makes a lot of sense. I'm just curious, though, that, well, maybe curious is not the word, but being that there's so many outlets these days, Logo and Bravo and a lot of these networks that do, in a way, cater to a queer audience, that I would think that they would be great partners for you. Have they shown any interest, Matt, as to?
So our idea when we started the company was to really partner with those celebrity production companies.
Okay.
Because they have the inroads, and I have some inroads too, but it's almost more beneficial to enter those conversations with that marquee name.
Sure.
Even if they don't participate in producing, but they're like a silent partner.
Right.
So it is, here's the reality too, Barry, is that we're not the only ones who are going, oh, it's time to celebrate diversity.
Right.
What we're finding is now everybody's jumping on that bandwagon.
They're not doing it.
No, they're not doing it, but they're talking about it.
They're talking about it, true.
And
there are more queer people on some of the shows now. Maybe they're not the leading act parts, but at least there's more visibility than there had been.
100%. You look at Laverne Cox, who like opened up the Emmys, and she looked amazing, and she's wonderful. And I'll tell you two interesting stories, and then I'm going to pass it on. But I recently went to the University of Toronto for a speaking engagement with Miss J.
Miss J was on my podcast. I love her. I love him.
Listeners who don't know who Miss J is, Miss J was the fabulous coach on America's Top Model,
right?
Who taught the models how to walk and strut and do their thing. And he has very expressive eyes of like, oh my gosh, what's that happening? But we went to the University of Toronto and spoke to college kids and about this exact topic. And what I took from that 2-hour speech was that there are 18, 19, 20-year-old kids out there who are very diverse. Parents are Black and Asian. They are sexually queer, bi, fluid.
Yeah.
Like there's so many stackable things that make them so different. And the common theme was, please, please, please put us on TV so we can be heard. We are struggling. We don't know where we're going to find jobs. We don't know if we're accepted, And it is, it was really kind of like important to hear.
It's important to hear, and it means they're watching as well.
Yeah.
But it's, when you think about it, so many of the shows, they shouldn't be segregated into this is a gay show, or this is a queer show, or this is this show. Why can't everything just be merged and integrated into the sports?
Yes, Barry, you can probably speak better to that. But there's one thing that's bizarre to me in the media. And shows like this, first of all, Barbara and Karen, thank you, because it brings light to so many different things. I'm going to say something right now that is challenging. And if it's not the topic you want to talk about, that's fine.
Go ahead, anything.
But being raised in Minnesota, knowing I was gay, at 24, I hopped in a car and I drove to LA, and I thought I will be accepted there. I will be okay there.
Mm-hmm.
And in my 20 years in LA, I'm going to tell you something. Not one gay man has ever raised their hand to say, let me help you.
Seriously, wow.
Not
See,
one.
there you go. They
I
were,
think
what
you
were
should
they,
come to New
afraid or
York.
something?
Barry, I'll come to New York in a second. Okay?
No,
And
but
maybe that's LA. But
yeah.
what also happens is there's a competition then that happens amongst these subcultures.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I've only been hired in LA by straight women and
Seriously?
black women.
Interesting. Okay.
And I'm only saying that because we have to, like, I'll tell you my big story later, but I'm the son of missionary parents in Guatemala. I'm Guatemalan.
Really?
Okay. So my fight for life has been different. I see life differently. I see it with reverse discrimination. And all I've ever wanted for me and for everybody else is to feel included.
You know, as I'm listening to you, Matt, and I know we're talking about, you know, the gay community for the most part, but my son, who's 30 years old now, is high functioning autistic. He belongs in a group where people look at him, and once they know he's autistic, they'll say, no, you can't be because you don't look it.
Right.
And, you know, his idea is when he looks at your story or his story, is that it needs to be incorporated all together. Because if we aren't all together, then we're still going to be identified as being different.
Yeah.
And we aren't different. We are all the same. I'm listening to the three of you, and you had the same thoughts and ideas that I have, and we've all been brought up differently.
Yeah.
It's really about equal rights and equal justice and emerging and humanity. And with getting back to the media too in LA, and I watch TV constantly. I've had more options fail than anything, the whole thing. And having a daughter in the business, I'm going to tell you something. I am still shocked, even though it's getting better, thanks to what you're doing, because you're obviously a very seasoned at it and talented, and you're really bringing the stories to the networks. But when we sit down to watch TV at night, just regular TV, it's mostly generally white privilege stuff. There's some really good things on TV, and I hear what you're saying, and they're talking about it, true. But how can it start reaching the higher ups? I call them the boys in the pinstripe suits, sitting there and saying, "Oh, I love it, I love it, I love it," and then you never hear
Right.
from
That's
them
part
again.
Yeah.
of it. Yeah. That's a huge part of it.
Well,
They're
Yeah.
running the media.
aren't things changing a bit where the networks seem to be on their way out, and the streaming companies are on the way in, right? And then you have the new technology, TikTok and all these other things where young people aren't going through agents; they're creating their own, type of stuff. Sorry about the phone. And whoops, sorry about that.
They're creating their own. They're creating their own.
They're creating their
But so all this other stuff is coming along. So is that, Matt? Do you think that's a way for people to get into the business in another way? Because this new technology is getting the eyeballs with the young people. The young people aren't watching as much TV as people who are older. I mean,
And it's interesting because, as you know, we have lots of different generations on this call and lots of different generations listening.
Yeah.
It's, for somebody like me, it's hard for me to keep track of the TikTok, YouTube stuff. I don't quite totally get it,
Right.
but that's like when probably cable television came around, and my mom was probably like, "Why are you watching FX?" I don't know. It's just trickle down. But what's happening is the attention span of the youngsters is so short that they only need to watch 2 to 3 minutes of content and they feel fine. I think with diversity and stuff on TV, I am proud of shows like One Day at a Time that celebrates a Latino family, and they're doing a great job. And that's Norman Lear who brought that to the forefront.
Yes, yes.
And so I think that that's
yes.
awesome. I think Orange is the New Black was a great show.
I love,
you know, and we have all different diverse characters in there. And
Yes,
I
yes.
think on Days of Our Lives there is a gay romance, and I think that I think that it actually is out there. I do think that you know, Will and Grace obviously shaped you know, the Jack and the Jack character, just like let every parent in Iowa go, oh, that's my son, that's okay. It's on TV now. So I think it is our job to put the differences on TV, because then you realize that's okay.
On mainstream network TV, because let's face it, everybody's tuning in. You know, I know so many people who they don't know where their next meal is coming from right now. It's such a sad, we're in such a sad state with the COVID, but they have Netflix.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing, and they want to watch those series. And so many of my colleagues say, but when are we going to have, you know, a real story by gay writers or transgender writers, or the real stories, without having someone just thrown in, oh, I have a transgender person on my show, he's an actor. When is that going to happen?
Isn't it getting better now? Because like Netflix doesn't depend on advertising, and neither does HBO. And they're the ones who have been creating a lot of the more interesting shows.
Yeah.
It's the networks that have to worry about advertising and advertisers and mainstream and dumbing down and all that. But more people are getting away from that. So it's probably more opportunities for you, Matt, I would imagine.
Here's the interesting thing. Like, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm always kind of seeking opportunity for myself, right? Because as a producer, you're pushing a rock up a hill, let's be honest.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm always looking for opportunities to stay alive and reinvent and create, always celebrating diversity. And so HBO, Time Warner has a mandate now. I was just on the phone with a guy that should be on one of your shows, actually, Barbara. A guy who runs diversity for HBO. They now have to hire somebody for every single department to represent diversity. So that marketing, PR, casting, all the different departments of a network have an inclusion executive that helps just streamline everything to make sure that the communication is authentic. Rogers and Cowan is a huge PR firm.
Yeah, huge.
They just built an entire division, which is their LGBTQ PR division, which means that they represent brands. Those brands will now be wanting to do those 3-minute stories, Barry, that you talked about. And they'll look for production companies to do a story for their Toyota campaign about an interracial couple, you know, so people are doing it. Now, again, not to be negative Nancy, okay? But Barry, you said that's good opportunity for you. I have lost out on 4 wonderful job opportunities to ethnic women.
Oh, really?
Because that's what's going on.
Yeah.
And so my fight and my passion and where I lived my entire life for inclusion, you know, being raised by Mayan Indians.
Yes.
And I was the white kid.
Yes.
Right? So when I moved to America and I spoke only Spanish and saw other white kids, I did not feel included. So I'm only saying that because inclusion is the bottom rung of Maslow's hierarchy of need. Until you feel included, you can't grow as a human being.
Not only that, but the media cannot expand and become something so wonderful. And it is. Nothing is more wonderful than the personal story and getting it out there. But then how does it get out there? How many stories do you get, and how do you go through them?
Well, you know, the proof has to be in the pudding, right? It's got to be good writing. So
Yeah, of
we
course.
never read scripts knowing who the writer is.
Mhm.
It has to be a good script, and then we call them in for a meeting, and we kind of cross our fingers, and we're like, oh, I hope that they're like hitting all of our marks. I hope that they, you know, hit the diversity mark. We hope that they're ethnic. We hope that they're funny, and you know, we read. That's kind of how that started.
You know,
I'm also doing it a different way now, which is I'm finding ethnic actors who are also writers, and I'm bringing them into my fold, and I'm helping them to develop log lines.
Oh, that's wonderful.
you
Yeah.
know, one of my favorite shows happens to be The Good Doctor.
Oh yeah.
But you have this wonderful actor playing an autistic doctor. You can't tell me there isn't somebody out there with autism who's a phenomenal actor.
Mhm.
And that's how they should be filling these roles.
Yeah.
Whether we're talking about Black, gay, white, Mexican. Why are we dressing people up and creating the role when people can do that role?
Well, Karen, it's a really good question, and that is how the industry is divided. It's divided into scripted programming and unscripted programming. So
Yes.
what you just said is like, is there an unscripted version of that doctor?
Yeah.
And if so, you should find him and build a show.
Absolutely.
And they still present the gay man, so to speak. They still present the gay man in not a really authentic way. I'm speaking generally without going into all the details. Do you agree with that? Do you think it's getting better?
Well, what is a gay man? What do you?
Well, like the show, for example, I'll just say the one
very
show
good question.
the one show I can't stand is the one with Jane Fonda and
Grace and Frankie.
Yeah, it's like they threw in a gay couple. I don't remember the whole segment, but I thought it was very, very fake and not authentic. It was like, well, let's throw in, you know, the wife falls in love with. Well, look, in my novel, I wrote about a woman who falls in love with a gay man, but that's different. This is a TV show that's coming out every single week. You know that segment where she falls in love or runs off with I forget, but anyway, I want to know the role of the gay man in these stories.
They're behind the scenes.
Yeah.
That's where the gay man is.
Yes. I mean, how are they presenting diversity? It's great that they're talking about it and that diversity is happening. Thank God. I won't be here for this next world, but I hope it's going to be not to lose your identity. It's wonderful to be gay or trans, or it's wonderful to identify, I am who I am, I'm myself. What a gift to feel that. But what a gift if it can all merge with equality. And I'm just wondering how you feel about that, if it's happening now.
Barbara, I think, and this is just I haven't thought about this before, but I think that when you say the word equality and bring the true stories to the forefront, I think maybe what we're saying with that is you don't one day go from this to being gay. You don't one day go from I'm straight to now I'm a trans woman, right? Like I think if we're telling stories, the authenticity comes from the struggle. You know, I wanted, as a gay man, I wanted to commit suicide for 12 years. You know, I had no support. And that's why it's important, is that we show support. That's literally why the story should be told, because the struggle is real.
If they show the struggle, it's like Barry talked on one of my shows about being bullied in high school, and you've written about it, Barry, and you're getting a huge response. So if that comes through rather than, oh, she fell in love with the guy next door and he's gay and ran off, and then the canned laughter comes. There have been some films that have been quite serious and very, very good. There are few, but some excellent ones. But it sounds like that you're making headway right now with this production company. So how many stories come in a day, would you say?
Oh, we have 35 shows, about 25 to 35 shows that we are kind of pitching out to the community.
Oh.
And so what we do is we call up our celebrity production companies and we see if they want to partner on a couple of shows. Now, here's the other part of it that's tricky for you guys and the listeners, is that we're living in COVID and quarantine time. Okay. So our genius idea of celebrating diversity kind of got put on a pause. But at the same time, during this quiet time, we've had like 3 or 4 Zoom meetings a day with like big, heavy hitters because they have time.
Yes, that's a good thing. Yes.
Yeah, that was a great thing. And great relationships and great contacts have come from that.
Yeah.
However, the truth is Hollywood and entertainment is kind of on pause.
Yes.
Right? So it's like I'm having the meetings, I'm having the conversations, but when it comes to like a financial sale, they're like, we're going to get back to you guys in 2022.
Yeah, they're not buying right now. Isn't that?
Everybody's got 6 or 7 shows in their pipeline. And that pipeline of shows have already been bought. Right. They just have to be made. They just have to be made. And they can't because of COVID.
I know that's the not good. But meanwhile, you can get the shows sold and you can get them out there.
Yeah. It's so important. It's so important.
It's very important to do it now. It's just like Barry with PR, everything is shut down, right, Barry?
Everything.
Everything.
So let me throw this question out to all of you, because we all know that podcasts and Zoom and Skype, they're making people aware of things. So why aren't we taking these ideas and really pushing them even further? Getting people to listen to the podcast, to understand it, hear Barry talk about what it was like to be bullied, okay? Because people probably don't even believe it, okay? But when you tell it and you're sincere, they connect and they go, well, I never would have bullied you. Well, maybe you would have, okay? How can we stop it today? And the same thing with, picking the right people and all coming together. We have the next year or two to bring this to a lead.
I think that's a good point, Karen. And I think what Matt is doing, for example, and what Barry has said before, this is a time. It is a time for creativity. And it's also a time for people to blend and bond together and to get your works out there. I think in a strange way, a lot of writers have more hope right now because they figure, okay, Matt's at home, he's not going anywhere. I'll send him my story. Well, he'll read it for sure. Now, they don't realize that it's even busier right now. But there is more of an attitude. I find myself doing it myself.
Yeah.
We're at home and we don't know. I mean, 2022, a terrible thing to say, isn't that far off in the scheme of things. And meanwhile, if projects are bought, it is time for expansion and reflection as well.
But isn't that the problem? The money's not there.
Barry, that is kind of the well, I think it goes back to what we were talking earlier, right? So if like you've got, let's just say ABC, for example, just as
Right.
an example, okay?
Because you've worked with ABC and
But I'm just giving them as an example. This is not a
yeah.
true story. As an example, they
Mhm.
might have 10 different production companies underneath them, right?
Mhm.
And so then the mandate is you 10 production companies pitch us shows, and then the executives on the top rung are deciding which ones are getting greenlit. That's
Yeah.
how it
Yeah.
always is.
Yeah.
So I say that because Dava and I are trying to partner with those 10 production companies. One of those 10 and say, we've got great shows. We've been developing diverse voices for an entire year, and we've basically done your job for you.
Right.
Okay. So here is a magnificent slate of projects.
Mhm.
The problem is that it's just a pipeline. There's so many layers and so many steps. And then when you get, and again, just ABC as an example,
Mhm.
have executive shuffle, executive
Yes.
power, executive struggle. Like it's hard. And then you look at like a Netflix that's putting out so much programming.
Yes.
But when you turn on Netflix, it's starting to feel kind of like predictable almost.
And a little schlocky. I mean, it's almost like every day I'm getting stuff on my phone, what to watch, and I watch everything. But you're right. It has a texture and a tone, and it is predictable. And I'm speaking
Not
generally.
all of them, but
Yeah. Yeah. I'm speaking generally.
there's some real, I mean, great programs, by the way.
Mhm.
But sometimes some of the, they're going through a struggle right now with their family comedies because they are kind of, they're all starting to feel a little bit the same.
Yeah.
So they need these authentic voices. We just got to get in
Authentic
there.
voices,
Gotta get in
audience, listeners, do you hear that? Authentic voices. You've got to listen to what Matt and Barry are saying. It's about authentic voices and coming together. And also the people who are buying the projects, the boys upstairs, I call them, who actually are buying the projects. They've got to change, just like some of the old geezers in Congress. We've got to get rid of some of these, old white guys who are making the same decisions over and over again.
Yeah,
And get some new blood. Diversity takes diversity to get diversity out there.
Well, here's as gay men, we've always had this struggle as nature versus nurture, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the real deal? Okay. And so there is a wonderful African American Black actor in New York who's the star of every single Broadway show, and he's so talented. And he now lives in LA because of COVID, and we met for a coffee. And if you guys would like, I would like to just share with you his authentic log line.
Oh, I'd love
Okay.
to hear his
Absolutely.
And
log.
hopefully this can come to TV, but this is what we came up with that can help with this authenticity. So just picture, if you can, Portland on the same day, the same time, 3 beautiful Black boys are born into the world. They're wrapped in the same beautiful hospital blue blanket, and they just happen to be born the same day at the same time. As we pan up from the nursery, we see that baby number 1, parents are a lesbian couple.
Mm-hmm.
Baby number 2, we pan up, and it's this voluptuous, beautiful, sassy Black woman with her Asian husband.
Mm-hmm.
And baby number 3, we pan up to a very wealthy, single Black male.
Mm-hmm.
I like this story because what's going to happen is these boys will bond throughout their childhood because they'll be in the same neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
They will have a bond kind of like brothers,
Mm-hmm.
but their existence inside their homes is going to be incredibly different. Nature versus nurture.
Mm-hmm.
What is the existence in your home, in your home, in your home? I can tell you the one with the privileged Black dad that is a dentist, when it's time for the school trip to Switzerland, he gets to go. Well, does the lesbian couple also have that kind of money for their child? I mean, maybe so. I'm not saying they don't have money, but
Yeah.
you hear what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it becomes a little bit of this authenticity we're talking about, because it then becomes about living inside certain walls, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I'm not sure that it quite hits exactly all the points of diversity, but I think it's a starting
I
point.
think that's very interesting. But again, I want to ask all of you what you think. This simplistic, our attitude, the attitude of our culture has to grow and change and merge. It just has to. That's a whole nother subject. But people who are watching your shows and watching diversity, uh, are they looking at it as entertainment, or is it natural? Is it natural in their lives, or are they going to turn it off and say, "Oh, did you see that show about the gay couple and the trans couple?" Or is it just going to merge? I know I'm entering a whole nother.
Yeah. Before you do that, Barbara, I was just
Yeah.
curious, Matt, is this, without naming names, is this actor the one been in 2 recent Broadway musicals?
Yes,
And he was on a TV show recently?
I think so. Like a guest star?
Is it Jeremy Pope?
No, it's not Jeremy Pope.
Oh, okay.
Not Jeremy Pope.
Okay.
I'll tell you. I don't know if I should say his name out loud, but he's a really good actor,
Yeah.
and he does all the Disney theatrical productions.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. So it is. So essentially, because I know that you both have to go, or we could go talk, but essentially, I think working on diversity is the highest form, to me, the highest form of humanity and art and entertainment right now, and living and authenticity. So for the listeners out there who are wearing a red hat, that's a whole nother thing, where they're just diversity is a dirty word. I hope that you get something out of this, because diversity means that we're basically all human beings on this planet, and there's many ways to have entertainment and to be with each other and to see each other. And that's what we need. This isn't political or anything. So take off your friggin' red hat
Yeah.
and think about diversity and humanity. And Barry, is there anything that you want to say addressing homophobia? Because
Well, I think we covered a lot, but I was going to say, based on our conversation, is Matt and everybody else, what do you think about RuPaul's place in all this? I think his show, this drag race, has changed a lot. It's opened a lot of doors up, and it's become mainstream, this whole thing. So I think he has changed the industry quite a bit.
Hugely, and has won Emmys for it. Tons of awards. Like, not only like shifted, something that on TV, I think the first day they heard that pitch, they were like, what? But like, it's become a huge phenomenon and well-deserved, all the awards.
oh yeah.
So I think that I actually do think that change is happening.
I think it's happening, and you are a forerunner in it. And you are, Barry, you're writing about it. And I really think, thank God for both of you. And for all the listeners, I think, again, your production company, can you say it again?
Yeah, it's called All Roads Lead Productions.
I love the title.
Well, because it means we're all involved together. But also, I want to just kind of say, my last note is that everybody is entitled an opinion. Everyone is
entitled what?
An opinion.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And what we have to remember is, whether you're that power executive at Fox or ABC, or you're a student in Toronto, no opinion is always right.
Right. That's a really good point, and that's what makes diversity too.
That's right.
That's a very good point, Matt. And I just want to thank you all for this conversation. It's so important. And I suspect that very soon, if not a decade at least, there's going to be, this will be looked back on. It's all changing. It's all changing. And I love that you're bringing the voices and the stories. That to me is the most important. How can they reach you? For example, listeners who want to contact you, Matt, and for further discussion or anything, or to send a story or anything, how
Sure.
can they reach you?
Yeah, I don't know. Is your email public for this show?
Yeah.
Anybody who would like to email you, then forward that to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
They could also send it to newclevelandradio@gmail.com, and we'll make
Okay.
sure you get it. That way it's only seen by the radio station, and we just send it on to you.
And for the listeners out there, watch this podcast on YouTube and all the other outlets, and tell people about it, because this is only the beginning of a discussion. And if you want to reach me, I'm just going to say one little plug here. In this culture, and being 84, for decades I have felt age discrimination, and in the media as well. That's a whole nother subject. But if you really want to know more about it, please join Age March, Age Magnificent. We are having the first virtual Age March in history. It's going to be global. It's in production right now. L'Oreal Revitalash is sponsoring it, and they're in the process of finding a celebrity face of age for it. And it is for all races, all genders, all sexualities, all ages to come together. So we will have a generation where we will not be identified by our number, defined by our numbers. And this is part of the diversity as well. So go to agemarch.org, join, so your name will be on the database, and maybe you'll be chosen to be on the show, which is March 2021. And if you want to read my last novel, which is, part of it is she falls in love with a gay man, and see how she feels about that. Love Sometimes is coming out in Audible. Simon Schuster is releasing it next week, the 20th, they said, in Audible. And the book's available on Amazon and all bookstores. Outside of that, stay safe. I love you all.
Thank you for having us on.
Thank you for having both of you coming on. I'd like to continue this. And Karen, I love you always.
Well,
Thank you.
Barry, let me know when I should come to New York. I'll hop on a plane.
Okay.
hey,
Once the masks are off, come on by.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
sounds wonderful. Well, again, everybody, stay safe, and we will all be in touch. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Barbara.
Bye-bye.